Number 97. Today we're talking about setting up field networks in order to support events. I'm Chris Mattia. My amateur radio call sign is Whiskey 6 Alpha Hotel. I'm joined today by my esteemed colleagues, Dan NR6V, David W0DHG, and Scott KM6RFB. Let's get right into today's topic because we have a lot to cover today. So if David, if you can pull the folks down, we're going to start off with a Winlink check-in. So if you have access to Winlink, then go ahead and send in a Winlink check-in. Send it to all four of our call signs. They are W0DHG, NR6V, KM6RFB, W6AH, and our tactical address, WaveTalkers. One of the guys will put a link inside of both the YouTube and as well as inside of the Zoom chat for you. When you're filling out the form, go ahead and let us know, how do you or your group use networks in the field when you're supporting events? Let's go ahead and go over to the walk up, and we'll walk through the process of sending in a Winlink check-in. And of course, that's not plugged in right now. Hang on, give me just a second here. Let me just swap over to that device. And we'll go back to here. And does that come up? There we go. This should. There we go. All right. So what you're going to do is you're going to open up your copy of Winlink. You're going to come up here to the top of the toolbar. You're going to click on the new message button. When the new message comes up, you're just going to come up here to the top of the toolbar and click on the button that says Select Template. When you do, if the demo gods are with you, it should open up this little window here called Template Manager. You're going to click the little plus sign next to Standard Templates, and you're going to come down to the section that says General Forms. Go ahead and give that a click. If you scroll down a little further in the list, you should find Winlink check-in.txt. Go ahead and select that and then give it a double click. Now, if the demo gods are with you, it should open up in your web browser of choice, and you can fill out the standard Winlink check-in form. Up here at the top, you always want to make sure that you click the box that says date and time. When you do, what that's going to do is it's going to set the date and time for this particular form to your computer's current date and time. That way, your form data gets sorted properly when we map this at the end of the show. So I'm going to hit OK. In the to field, this is where you're going to put all of our call signs. Again, those are W0DHG, NR6V, KM6RFB, W6AH, and our tactical address, WaveTalkers. In the from section, put in your call sign, and then in the station contact name, this is going to be your handle, your first name. For the initial operators, if there are any other operators that are sitting there watching the show with you, either live inside of our Zoom, live on YouTube, or any of the other platforms that we live stream to, or maybe you're watching it later in the week, then go ahead and let us know who else is watching this along with you. In the session section, you're going to let us know that this is an exercise, and you're going to come over here for the service. Let us know if you're sending this in via amateur radio or if you're going to send it in via shares. For the band, let us know how you're sending that in as well. If you're just using the internet, go ahead and send that via Telnet. It's a perfectly acceptable way to be able to send in your traffic. If you'd like a little bit of a challenge, try sending it via one of the RF modes, HF, VHF, UHF, super high frequency, whichever system that you have access to. For the session type, let us know how you're sending that traffic in. Are you sending it via Telnet, Packet, Pactor, or so forth? The location, this is the location where you're at. Even if you just let us know the state that you're in, that really helps to kind of know roughly where people are coming in from. If you should have your latitude and longitude should be automatically filled in for you. That comes in off of your grid square that you filled in when you first set up your Winlink account. So all that should be pre-populated for you. Down here in the comment section, this is where you want to let us know how you or your group uses networks out in the field. Go ahead and hit the submit button when you're all finished with that. You'll get a couple of pop-ups that'll show up here. You can just keep clicking OK. Those things go away. And when you're back to a blank browser window, you can go ahead and close the browser window, and all of those data should be automatically filled in for you here inside of that email that you're going to send. You're going to come up here and you just press the post to outbox button. and you should see your outbox increment by one. And so you have one sitting in your outbox. You can then come up here, click the open session type for the type of session you're going to send your traffic for, and it should spring open a window that looks something like this. You click the start button, and depending on what system that you've set up, you should have your traffic going out. It looks like we've got traffic coming in from around the planet. So later in the show, we'll check back and we'll map all of these. So if you get access to Winlink, even during the show or later in the week, go ahead and send in your Winlink traffic. So hopefully we can get you to appear on the map for us. So I'm going to go ahead and download those. We'll check back later in the show as we get further along. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to jump back over to the slides, and we're going to get into today's topic, which is, plug this back in over here. There we go. Which is going to be event support using field networks. And one of the things that we're really going to dive into today is we're going to talk about a PACE plan. Now, a PACE plan, as you know, is your primary, your alternate, your contingency, and your emergency plan for various different services or opportunities that you need to be able to deal with when you're out in the field. A lot of times people focus on PACE plans, though, for themselves when they're trying to maybe bug out of town, or they're going to, whatever it is that they're going to do in order to make sure that you're able to remain in communication, keep your safety and survival safe, and so forth. However, today what we're going to be focusing on is event support. And we're going to talk about PACE plans for your event support. And we're going to focus much more on the networking aspect. And we're going to do this kind of in a reverse order. We're going to start off looking at the emergency contingency plans that you may want to have when you're operating and supporting an event as a ham radio operator. And then we're going to move further up the chain into what would be more of a primary sort of contingency plan that you may want to be able to have, or a PACE plan that you might want to be able to leverage as you're doing that. As we're walking through this, we're going to look at different ways that you can continue to build capacity in what you're doing. You want to build additional robustness in the networks that you're setting up and you're leveraging, redundancy in order to ensure that your network stays up and operating throughout whatever happens during the event. And you want to build in diversity into your network. So if one service tends to go down or has an issue, your network stays up and running and is nice and solid. So that's the kind of overview of what we're going to be going into in today's episode. So let's dive right into that. Now, as ham radio operators, we are very much focused on wireless voice and data communications. And we do this in a variety of different ways, but what we really tend to dive into and focus on is personal infrastructure. And we create networks of communication between one individual and the rest of the members of our group. That group might be one person, it might be 20 people or 50 or 100 people, but we're creating a network. And that's really where the power of communication comes in. Now, the tool that we tend to focus on as ham radio operators is radio waves. We send our traffic, whether it be voice or data, via radio waves. And that can oftentimes be ham radio, but when you start thinking about a lot of the modern technology, it's all being done over radio waves as well. Wi-Fi, your cell phone, and so forth, all of that is coming over radio waves. So we're going to take what we know as ham radio operators, being able to use simplex communication, where we're talking one-to-one, in order to establish communication for both voice and data communications, or using things like repeaters. And those repeaters might be infrastructure that's already in place, such as your local area repeater that you might have set up in your area. They could be Winlink gateways that are set up in your town or in your state, or maybe in adjacent states or further across the country or world. All of that infrastructure is all able to be leveraged. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but this would be that base level emergency side of your PACE plan. When everything else is having issues, everything else is failing, this is where you're going to kind of fall back to as a last resort. But it's not necessarily where you're going to start building out support for an event, because at an event, more than likely, you're going to have your cell phone there with you. Pretty much all of us have a cell phone at this point. We all have a connection to the internet. For the most part, those are pretty stable in most areas. And so there's a lot of things that you're able to do with your cell phone. So start to think of this down in that contingency portion of your communications plan, of your PACE plan. where you're able to leverage your phone to be able to do things like access data, access the internet, websites, web forms, and so forth. We'll look at some examples later on in the show. I want to take a little deeper look, though, at what's really going on with your cell phone. And so you have your cell phone, and it is connected to the internet through your cellular provider, whichever provider that happens to be. They all are pretty similar in one respect or another. What they're doing is they are connecting you to the internet, or what we like to call the wide area network. I tend to refer to this more as a wider area network, because when you start thinking about where your connection goes, it's connecting to a wider network of folks. And that would be the WAN port, or the WAN, the wireless access, or the wider area network. We're going to see this over and over as we dive into some of this networking capabilities here. What your cell provider is doing is, for your particular phone, it is assigning you an IP address. And I made this one up completely, so this is not my IP address or anyone that I know's IP address. So if it's your IP address, I apologize. I totally just made it up at random. But your cellular provider is going to create a IP address, and it's going to deliver it to your phone. That's your address, if you will, on the internet, so that you're able to access websites and resources out on the web. And the rest of the internet, all the rest of the IP or internet protocol, knows how to get that traffic back to you and back to your phone. It's really cool that it works at all. And so when you're out in the field, if you're just using your phone, this is a great way to just start. You got your phone, you're connected to the network, and you can do some basic, simple traffic. But oftentimes we'll have another device with us. Let's say you're at an aid station and you're having to keep track of other information. You're having to type in some information. It's a lot faster oftentimes to be able to type that on a laptop. And many of us don't have an internet connection just in our laptop. Some do have that, but most of us don't. So what you want to do is you want to make a way for you to get your internet connection from your phone over to your laptop. And pretty much all phones, it doesn't matter if you're using Android or iOS, there's a feature in there called a personal hotspot. And we'll walk through this process here in just a second for being able to turn it on. What it does is it takes your internet connection that's coming in from your cell provider, and it's creating a wireless network right around your phone, and it's sharing it out to other devices that you can then connect to, and you're able to pass data and internet traffic. What you're doing is you are creating a LAN, a local area network, at that point. Now, you have this one IP address that's come in from your internet provider, but you can't use that IP address for this other device. This other device needs its own IP address. So you're kind of stuck a little bit. You're like, hey, how do I create this? Well, it's really easy. In the background, when you flip this switch that says turn on your personal hotspot, it's also turning your phone into what's called a DHCP server, which is a dynamic host configuration protocol. A lot of fancy words. Basically, what it means is it's taking that IP address that you just got from your provider, it's converting your phone into a little internet server, and it's sharing that address over to the other clients that are going to connect wirelessly. And it's using this 192.168.1.1 networking address. We talked about that in more detail during the previous show when we talked about Arden Mesh networking. So we'll show you a link to that later in the show. What your phone is technically doing is it's acting as a server, and it's assigning an IP address to the clients that are connecting to it. That would be your laptop. Maybe it's your the partner who's working with you at that particular aid station, and you're sharing your internet connection with that person. Or maybe you're providing support for a runner or some member of the community, and they need to get some vital traffic and their phone just doesn't work in that location. You can create a little wireless bubble, if you will, by turning on this personal hotspot, share your internet connection, and it just goes over like that. So let me show you how you do this. I mean, this is so easy to be able to do. Let me go ahead and go to the overhead camera here, where I've got my phone set up here. And oops. I've got my phone set up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down to the settings section, and this is pretty similar to what you're going to do on either platform. And what you're looking for is there's this option here called personal hotspot. You go and just tap on that, And there's a place that you can select to allow others to join your hotspot. You can also assign it a password. Now, I just put a very simple password in here, and this is not the normal one that I use, and I'm going to change it right after this show. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it would get you in to join this right now. So all you do is you just touch the button, allow others to join, and now there's a wireless network right here where I'm at, and it's called whatever my phone's name is, and you set that in the general settings for your phone. And there's a wireless network now set up that other people are able to join on and access that wireless network. This is a great way to, if you're, maybe you're going to the event and you're not driving, you've got another operator with you that's driving, or maybe you're in a SAG wagon, you're providing communication support, and you need to be able to do something while you're on the road. You're not driving, so you're able to do some of this networking stuff, or you're at the aid station and you just need to be able to get your device, whatever it happens to be, onto the internet. Super fast, super easy to be able to do that. Let's jump back over here. Now, what are some of the limitations that you might run into when you are doing this sort of setup? Well, first of all, your phone is not the most powerful wireless access server or wireless access point. You're not pumping out a lot of powerful Wi-Fi out of your phone. So the range is going to be fairly limited. Think in the more like 10 to maybe 15, 20 feet or so for most phones. Because if you started to push more power into your wireless access and sharing that network out, you're going to burn up your battery pretty quickly. So it's pretty limited in the distance that you're able to share, but that's okay because it's a very personal type of connection. You're really looking to only support maybe one or two different clients, like your own laptop, maybe the laptop of the person who's working the station with you or something like that. It's meant for light usage. You're not streaming video over it over long periods of time and doing lots of really fancy internet things with it. You're just getting access to the internet and you're able to share that out. So that's the kind of first step in as we start to move up the contingency plan, move up our pace plan. The next thing that you would want to do is you would want to begin moving your connections to more wired connections. And this is also a feature that's built into all of your phones. It doesn't matter Android or iOS. And it's something called tethering. And basically, what you're going to do to tether a device is you're going to take your laptop and you're going to use a USB or a lightning cable, whatever's the right one for your platform. And you're just going to plug it into your device. You turn on that internet sharing that I just showed you, and now your internet connection from your phone is shared directly to your laptop, but it's done through that charging cable, through that USB cable. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, first of all, your battery is being charged in your phone from your laptop while you're using that internet. You're not pumping lots more RF out into the area, so you're keeping your connection much more localized. You're using it for you in the area that you need to do. Um, and it really is pretty straightforward. You literally just take the cable that you need, you plug it into your phone, you plug that into your laptop, and it just works. It's pretty straightforward. Now, you may need to have this built into your cellular plan. I know early on this was a special option that you had to be able to pay extra for. Not all cell carriers charge for this anymore, but some do. So be sure to check your plan to find out if tethering is part of your overall plan. Now, let's say you have another connection that another device that you need to be able to add onto this network. Well, in order to do that, well, if we don't have the Wi-Fi on, then you can't just Wi-Fi bubble over to that other device. But what you can do is you can turn on what's called share internet connection. You can plug an Ethernet cable into your laptop, and then you can run out an Ethernet cable to that other device. Now, the advantage to doing this is huge because Ethernet cables allow you to get up to 300 feet or about 100 meters away with the distance of what the cable supports. And that's huge because now, let's say you're at an aid station, you're supporting the support team that's there. You can have your communication set up there at your antenna. You can run a long Ethernet cable over and offer some internet connectivity to the folks that are supporting the aid station to maybe one terminal that's over there or so forth. It allows that extension of the internet for what you need to do. Let me show you quickly how you would go ahead and set that up. So let me come back over to the walk up here, and I'm here on my laptop. Now I'm going to do this on a Mac. We'll have David kind of walk through this on a Windows machine here in just a second. What you're going to do is you're going to first take your network cable and you're going to plug it into your phone. So I'm going to just tether my phone here real quick and just simply plug it into my network. So I have an internet connection that's now automatically just coming from my phone by simply just plugging in the cable. And if we just look briefly here at the overhead cam, you can see the setup that I have. I literally just have my phone and it's connected via the lightning cable over into my laptop. Now I'm going to come back over here on my laptop. I'm going to go up to the Apple menu. I'm going to come down here to System Settings. And when System Settings opens up, depending on the version of the operating system you're using, it may or may not look exactly like this. What you're looking for is the sharing section, though. In the latest version of the OS, that's under the General section. And there's an option for sharing. You go ahead and click on that. And what you're looking for is the internet sharing options. Now, click on the little info option over here on the right. Then you can come over here and you can say share your internet connection from. You can select where you are getting that internet connection from. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say my iPhone USB. Now it's going to take that internet connection from my iPhone and I can say which ports I want to have it shared to. So I have some Ethernet dongles. I could go ahead and plug those into other ports on my laptop. And then I could just turn on those specific Ethernet adapters. And then when I hit done, or I'm sorry, I come up here to the top and I click the little box to turn this on, it's going to give me a little warning. You're going to share your internet connection. And that's it. Anybody who plugs into an Ethernet cable into that dongle then are getting an access to the internet. So I could run that out 300 feet if I needed to an aid station or so forth to be able to deliver some internet service to them with that. Super easy to be able to do. David, do you want to quickly walk through how you would do that on a Windows machine?
Yeah, absolutely. I can show everybody here. So I'll jump over to my Windows box here. And much like Chris showed you on the Mac, you can do the same thing on your Windows box. You'll want to start out with your network connection, and you can, again, share a wired or wireless network connection. You'll go in and open up the network and internet settings. And there's actually two ways to do it here in Windows. So one is I'm going to open up my Wi-Fi connection, and I'm going to show you here. There is a hotspot option directly. You can basically just turn that hotspot item on here. And actually, it's better to search it up this way, your mobile hotspot. You select mobile hotspot, and you turn it on, and then you'll get to choose which of your connections that you're going to share. Now, this PC that we're looking at right now only has a Wi-Fi connection, but if I had an Ethernet direct connection to it, I could select that one as well, or even Bluetooth if we had a network connection. So that's one way to do it. The other way you can do it in Windows is go look at the status of your adapters. You'll want to change your adapter options. And in the adapter options here, again, you see all of the possible connections. You can see only my Wi-Fi is available right now. I don't have anything plugged in Ethernet or Bluetooth. Select the items, look at the property, and there's a sharing option here. And in the sharing option here, you can tell it, hey, allow other network users to connect to the internet using this connection here. And it'll pass it through exactly the same as Chris showed you on his Mac. Pretty easy. Back to you, Chris.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Let me jump back over to the slides and we will repin me back up.
There you go.
Oops. Doesn't look like I'm in full view. Give me 1 second here. There we go. Okay. So with this kind of setup, as we kind of walk through some of the other the data connections here, we've got our tethering, we got our internet connection. This is allowing for those longer distances at up to 300 feet because of that length of that Ethernet cable that you're able to leverage. You still want to limit this to maybe 1 or 2 clients because, again, you're using the internet connection from your phone and you're sharing it out to multiple people. And so you are going to be paying bandwidth charges. You're going to be paying the data that's being consumed. So you really want to be a little bit more conservative on how much you're sharing this connection out. and what sorts of data that you're being able to share out. So again, you want that light usage of this network connection as you're working with it. So the next kind of step up in our PACE plan is to leverage some better tools and leverage something that's a little more purpose built. And the tool really to look at there is the internet hotspots. These are usually they're available from all the different carriers. So AT&T, FirstNet offers these, Verizon, T-Mobile, all the different carriers basically offer them. And what a hotspot is, they look something like this. These are a couple of different hotspots that we have here. And what they do is they've got a SIM card inside of each one of these, and they're on the various different services, and they're just receiving the internet, and they're technically cell phones. They have a phone number associated with them. In fact, I take on the side of all of mine. I've got these covered over right now, but I actually put the phone number on the side of each of my hotspots, so it's very easy to know which account these are specifically tied to, and they will oftentimes I'll label which which service they're coming in from. So for instance, this is a Verizon hotspot, this one is on AT&T FirstNet, and this is just my backup, which works on Verizon as well. So with a hotspot, what it's going to do is it's going to create a Wi-Fi bubble for you. And it's going to do this either in the 2.4 or in the 5 gigahertz range of Wi-Fi. All of these are capable of doing both of those. And you go into the control software and you tell it which wireless networks you want to have, what you want the SSID to be, or the name of that network, how it shows up. You can say what that is. You can say what the password is. There's stuff set up in here automatically by default, and there's a front panel display on all of these, and you can have it so that the password will always show up as you kind of click through the different front panel displays. I'm not going to go showing the way that works right now, but know that it does. You can also have these devices create a guest network in addition to the standard 2.4 and the standard 5 gigahertz. Now, why is that important? Well, that's absolutely critical when you're doing event support, because it might be that you want to share your internet connection with the person who's operating there at your aid station, or maybe with some of the other volunteers that are working with you all. But you don't want them to eat up all your bandwidth. You want to limit what they're doing. It's invariably when you offer out internet connection, somebody's going to want to watch their local YouTube channel or TikTok or whatever it is that they want to watch. They're going to start streaming YouTube, and all of that would just eat up your bandwidth. So within a hotspot, you can go into the control settings and you can limit what especially that guest network is allowed to do. You can limit the bandwidth that's allowed to go through there, how long they're allowed to be connected, what sites they're allowed to go to. You can kind of lock all that stuff down. And it really is there in order for you to be able to protect yourself and your investment in this service that you've both buying for yourself, but also that you're providing to other folks. And we take these devices and we flip them over on their side or look on the back of them. You'll usually find a USB port on them, and that USB port is oftentimes used for powering the device, and it's also used for tethering. So a lot of these devices, you can simply plug in a USB-A, or most of them these days all have USB-C on them. You plug in a USB-C port, plug that into your computer, and now you've got a hard tether directly into your device. You don't have to create that Wi-Fi bubble if you don't want to. Other devices will actually have an Ethernet port or a LAN port on the back of the device. And these are definitely the ones you want to keep an eye out for if you can pick one up. As a matter of fact, if I go back over to this little setup here, this is the older one that I used for Verizon. And if you look on the back, there's a USB-C port on the back of this, but there's no Ethernet port anywhere on this thing. So I'm limited to just charging and doing tethering off of this port. I don't have the option of a LAN port on it. On the new access point that I have, not only does it charge via USB-C, but there's also a Ethernet port. It's a little hard to see in the light in here because everything's all black, but there's an Ethernet port right here, and that allows me to tether and share out. The other one that I have here, this is the FirstNet. This one's called a Nighthawk. And that one you can see also has it's USB-C here, and then this is an Ethernet port that's on this as well. If we come back over, the next thing that you're going to look for on some of these hotspots is some of the hotspots will have these extra little hidden ports, and they may not even look like ports at all. As a matter of fact, if I jump back over here and we look here at the Nighthawk, you can see these two little black vertical bars, and those are little covers. And if I pop those open, you can see that there is antenna ports on there. And this is really nice, especially for a ham radio operator. You know, one of the best ways to improve your signal is to get an external antenna, get that antenna up higher in a better location, not getting caught in all of the interference. So this allows you to set up two antennas with diversity on them and bring in those signals from a little bit further distance. This one also has a USB port on it, so you're able to do some other functions as well on this device. Now, as part of this overall setup here, you also have some of these devices have a little SD card slot in them. And if you're using your very fancy, which doesn't even exist, WaveTalkers SD cards, then you can actually plug those into some of these devices. And there is it'll turn on a web server that's built into the device. It'll also go in and it'll allow it to do a file sharing. So you may be in a situation where you've got your connection where you need to be able to share some different files with those that are around you, and you would be able to do that directly through the Nighthawk device. Let me keep plowing through here. Let's talk about some of the other advantages to using a hotspot, one of which is your distances are now kind of spread out a little bit further than what you were seeing with your cell phone. You're able to get your connection a little bit further out because it has that you can either put those external antennas on it or you can place it in another location. Another really nice thing is you're not tying up your cell phone to be able to offer out your internet service. So you still have your cell phone to be able to do other things with, and your hotspot is just sitting there dealing with all of the internet access. Usually these can handle more clients. 1 to 5 is pretty typical for some of your base plans. Now, you can pay more money and you can get access to be able to share to more clients and share that internet connection. But keep in mind, you have a limited resource, and the more you divide that out, the more you share it out to other people, the slower your connection is going to be. So you do want to be mindful of how you're managing this. However, if your internet connection is really solid, and I'll show you a way as we kind of walk through and we step up on our pace plan, how you can expand out your internet connection and to be able to support more clients with this. It's really amazing stuff. So usage-wise, you're looking at light to moderate usage. So a hotspot can typically handle a bit more throughput of data. Typically, the hotspots, when I've set them up, I'm typically getting anywhere from the 40 to maybe 60 or even faster connections megabits per second. So that's plenty fast enough to be able to do streaming and video support and all kinds of voice over IP and all kinds of different things. So it really is a very robust system to be able to set up and to be able to operate with all of these things. So as we mentioned earlier, as you're working up your pace plan, you've got this hotspot. Now you want to begin moving to wired connections whenever it's possible and whenever it's practical, because you may have, it might be fine to initially set up a Wi-Fi bubble off of your hotspot and connect a couple of computers, maybe a printer or so forth like that, to be able to share that out at, say, net control or wherever you're located. But as you continue to take on additional responsibilities, maybe you're in a more sensitive location, you may find that you need to support more and more clients. And the way to be able to do that is you add a network switch. And we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. Basically, you're going to take that Ethernet connection that's coming out of your hotspot. You're going to run it over and you're going to plug it into the uplink port on the switch. We'll talk about more about that in a second. Now, what kind of Ethernet cable do you need? Well, a Cat 5e cable is all you really need. It's the cheaper ones that you can find out there. You can buy bulk Cat 5e cable for, pennies on the dollar these days to be able to make up your own cables. As a matter of fact, episode number 94, we did an entire episode about what you need in your crimp kit in order to be able to make your own Ethernet cables, and we walk through the process step by step of making your own Ethernet cables. So it's a great way to be able to to be able to save some money on what you need to create for your own personal infrastructure, as well as being able to have a much more custom kind of installation. So you don't have to have super long cables all over the place. You just need what you need in order to set those up. So let's look in a little more detail about what a network switch is. So with a network switch, what you're going to do is you're going to take the internet connection that's coming in from your hotspot or wherever that internet connection happens to be coming from, and you're going to plug it into what becomes called the uplink port. Now, as soon as you plug in a live connection into a port, that port will have a little light that'll show up on top of it, and it'll let you know that, hey, there's some activity, there's something going on this. And this is the same for pretty much every switch that's out there. Now, with what is the uplink port? Is it a special port? No, it's where the internet connection is being uplinked into the switch, and then that switch is going to share that connection out. Now, by convention, I tend to use the highest port, the one that's all the way over to the right. I plug in whatever my network connection is directly into that port. That way, anytime I go up to a switch, I know that end port, that's the uplink. And if that one gets unplugged, then everything downstream is going to go offline at that point. So it's just a convention that I use. Do you have to use that one? No, but I'd really suggest adopting that. Just plug it in the far right-hand port, whatever the highest number is, and use that as your uplink port. That is where your connection is going to get shared out from. Now, there's some other ports that are available to you on most internet or many Ethernet or many switches, and those are PoE ports. PoE is a power over Ethernet. Not only is it carrying the data, that's the internet connection, but it's also carrying power up to about 48 volts of power to be able to bring additional devices online. And these ports are all noted on here, and we'll look at what those look like here in just a second. When you look at some of the things that you can do with PoE, some of the very common ones are using a wireless access point. So actually, let me switch over very quickly to the overhead here. So this is a Netgear GS108 switch. You can see that this is an 8-port switch. You can see it's the GS108PE. So this is the power over Ethernet. So this is the port that I would be using as my uplink port right here. I just plug my network connection into that port. And then down here, you can see the little highlight here. Those are the PoE ports. And so those will share the internet as well as power out to a device. Now, I mentioned that hotspot. So this is a typical hotspot that you might have. So this one is by Ubiquiti, and it's a wireless access point. And if you look on the back side of it, there's not a whole lot to be able to plug into the back. There is a network port that's back here. There's also a secondary port, so you can actually daisy chain these. But this primary port here, you plug that in, there's no power on this device. And literally all you do is you plug it into a PoE port on your switch, and the switch then powers the access point. And we'll talk later about what a controller is and how that would set up the wireless access for this particular device. And you can see on my access points, I just as a demonstration here, the SSID, this is what you would select if you're from your phone or from your computer as the name of the connection. So net control would be a common, easy one to be able to set up there. And you would put a simple password. I usually take a piece of gaff tape and just put it up in net control and says, this is what the wireless access port is, and this is what the password is. So anybody who's there in that location can get access to it. I'll oftentimes create a hidden SSID as well, one that's just for me, so that I can manage the bandwidth or manage any devices that I need to do, and it's segregated out from the main network that's out there for everybody else. So that's what an access point looks like. There's also a couple of other things you can run over power over Ethernet. There's cameras. So when we talked about some of the Arden stuff in the previous episode, we looked at some of the mesh cameras that were set up on mountaintops, and those can be able to bring in connections and share that video signal out over your network. The power is really all in the network, and David's going to talk about that in a little while when we look at some of the applications of doing some of these things. You can also do IP-based phones. So Ham Shack Hotline, there's a couple of other services that are available, as well as if you're on, say, the Arden Mesh Network, there's total IP-based phone systems. These can be really helpful. Let's say you're operating at the command center or you're operating at the race committee location, and they need a station where they've got a dedicated phone where all the people out in the field will be able to call directly back to. Rather than giving out somebody's personal cell phone, you could set up an IP-based phone, drop it in that location for them, and then they've got a direct phone to be able to pick up and answer calls as need be. It really is an amazing thing that you're able to do with this. And another PoE device is actual internet switches. So many of these switches, if you plug them into a power over Ethernet port, that will actually power the switch. So this is a great way to be able to extend your network from a single location. So you can take that one connection that's coming in from your hotspot and you can spread it out to serve the needs of your mission as much as you need to. So there's two types of these routers that are, or I'm sorry, of these switches that are available. There's some that are called unmanaged switches. These are typically your more low-cost ones. They allow for one LAN or one local area network. Basically, anything that's plugged into one of these ports is just going to be shared out to all of the ports simultaneously. And those look something like this. This is an older Cisco one that I have. And it's just a plain PoE port. It's not a managed switch. So if I plug something into here and I plug it into any of the different ports here, that same connection gets added to all of these different devices. It's a pretty simple switch. You can pick these up for fairly cheaply as you're working with them. The GS108 is a managed switch, so there's actually control software. So I can go in and with the control software, you're able to do what's called a managed switch. So a managed switch allows for multiple VLANs or virtual LANs. So that is really some pretty magic stuff. It's something we'll do in another show because it really kind of needs its own topic to be able to go further into. But in a nutshell, what it does is you need some additional configuration that allows you to control the traffic that's passing through your switch much more precisely. And that's what that's the difference in the two switches. You do pay a little bit more for these managed switches, and it requires a little more information to be able to, a little more knowledge and experience to be able to run them. But out of the box, they work just like unmanaged switches as well. So there's not really a whole lot special that you need to do right out of the box for these. So that's your switch. Now, as we continue building up our capacity for our little network that we're setting up here out in the field, the next level up in your pace plan, this would probably be more into your primary network now that you would be wanting to set up. If you're operating out of net control, you're taking on a major event that you're working with, that you're trying to support. And the thing that you would want to add at that point is a internet router. And I've got a few of those set up here. We'll look at a few little small portable routers here in just a second. But the way that these actually work, you take your hotspot and you're going to plug that directly into the router. Now, your hotspot is still getting its connection from your provider. That's out the WAN or the wider area network. Your hotspot is creating its own local area network and it's sharing that connection over to your router. But you then take your router and you take a LAN port off of there and you create a dedicated LAN into a switch. At this point, the router is literally just working as a switch, but it's sharing that connection out to more users. And now you can start doing some really cool things. So I mentioned those hotspots. Oh, I'm sorry. So from the router's perspective, that incoming connection is going to be called WAN 1 or the wider area network 1. It's going out to a wider area of the internet to be able to provide that. That's the feed that's coming in. The port that you're feeding from the router into your switch, that's called your LAN. And from the switch, then you can start doing all of those fancy things. So maybe you have that wireless access point that you're plugging in. You can add more services to what you're doing and how you're supporting your particular event. You can spread this network out over longer distances. Remember, each of these Ethernet runs can be up to 300 feet or about 100 meters. Well, you can also drop another switch at the end of that 300 feet and you can then go out another 300 feet from there. So if you really need to stretch out your network over a larger, different area to be able to support more people, you are able to do that in order to cover a greater distance. Other things you can run off your PoE. This is where you may want to run some of those cameras. So maybe at an event, you've got a camera that's dedicated, say, at the finish line, and you've got one set up at a couple of different locations where there's a lot of happenings going on, and you're using that either for security or maybe you're just feeding some big monitors that are being used for the race to provide some background information as to what's going on there. Because you're working off of a managed switch at this point, you can actually segregate that content out, and so you can make sure that that content is protected away from other people that might be just sharing the network with you if you're going to do that. Here's where you can hook up those IP-based phones and connect those in. Now, with a router, it opens up the possibility for you to have multiple WANs simultaneously. And that is wicked cool. So what you're doing here is, let's say you have two hotspots. You've got one that's on, say, FirstNet or AT&T, and we'll call that this blue hotspot that's over here, and then this red hotspot that's here, maybe that's on Verizon. So now you've added some diversity into your connection, and your router will automatically handle the connections that are coming in from those two. And there's a couple of ways that you can do this. First of all, you can set it up in a failover situation where if, say, AT&T goes down, all the traffic is automatically routed directly over to the Verizon hotspot, and your connection, as far as your users are concerned, just continues to remain up. As a matter of fact, if you're set up in this type of situation, or if you're running in this type of a configuration, you could have additional hotspots, and these don't have to be just from you. These could be other members of your team who have a hotspot. Maybe this one's for T-Mobile or something. And if one connection goes down, you can take another hotspot and just swap it in for the other WAN port, and your operators and your team keeps up and running, and everything's running just nice and smoothly at that point. Another way you can configure your router to manage these multiple different hotspots would be something called load balancing. And you can say, like, maybe you've got a really good, solid connection on FirstNet. You've got unlimited data that's going on to that particular network, and you want like 60 or maybe 70% of the traffic to be going through that particular connection. You go into the software for your router, you set that up, and then only 30% is going over that backup plan, or maybe it's only being used as a failover in case something happens to the first connection. You get a lot of options for how you can configure and manage your network for supporting the event that you are supporting. Now, by doing this, by creating this diversity, this redundancy in your network, and this much more robust network, you're able to support more clients, more users, more devices, in order to keep everything up and running smoothly. Whatever those core functions are, be sure to identify those first. Be sure to make sure that those core functions are set up so that they're getting the traffic and the access that they need. And then later on, you're able to share out anything that's excess out to other users as well. It'll make you really popular when you're able to provide the race committee or so forth with a little bit of internet connection in a place where they really don't have any. It makes you really popular, and the other members of your net control team, when they're all crammed into that net control trailer and they've got real good, strong internet connections, it makes you real popular for being able to do that. It really does. It gives you better support options for supporting the event, supporting your mission, and delivering to the clients that you're working with. So this was my setup. This is my Go box that I have put together. And this is what I used this past weekend at the Ventura Marathon. And let me just walk through how my network was set up and what it was that we were doing with that. So first of all, inside of the Go box, so this is a 6U Gator box, and up, kind of tucked way up in the top, I have my two little routers. Oh, you know what? I didn't show you the routers. Let me switch over and show you the routers real quick. So here are the different routers that I have. So this is a small Ubiquiti gateway that I use, is the primary one that I use these days. This is the HAP So this is a MikroTik HAP board. This is what I use when I'm doing all of my Arden networking. And you can see there's a WAN port on here. There's a couple of LAN ports on here and a PoE port. So this is both a router and a switch all combined. You can pick these up on Amazon for about 50 bucks, and they'll do all the stuff that this one does. It just is a much smaller, cheaper package. This is an older model, so you can pick these up now for about $100 usually online to find those. If you're really on a budget, though, these work pretty well. These are GL iNets. I picked this up years ago, and it's just a little small portable router. The first port over here on the left, that's a WAN port, so that could plug into the hotspot. And then there's a LAN port, so then you can use this LAN port to then share over to a small Ethernet switch that you have to be able to share out that connection. It's powered via USB. It's really a simple little device, and it's pretty easy to go in and configure this. So you really don't have to invest a lot of money. It just takes a little bit of know-how to get in and drive these things. But this is the one that I primarily use. And if we look at the front of this one, you can see here there's this first port is a console port. That's for actually, configuring it manually using hardcore text prompts and all kind of fancy stuff like that. The next one over here, this port here, this is the WAN 1 port. So this is the port that I would be configuring and connecting to one of my hotspots. The middle port here, that's the LAN port, and it's called LAN 1. And the second port over here is actually WAN 2 or LAN 2. So the way that I use this, I pull two different WAN connections coming in from the different hotspots. Those come into these two ports, and then this feeds my switch, which then feeds all of the rest of the devices. So let me show you how this configures. The other thing that you'll note on here, a couple of other quick things, is I put Velcro on the bottom of all of my devices and on the top of many of my devices. And I use these, just the sticky side of both of the Velcros, and I use those as attachment points. So let's go ahead and just quickly build out a wireless network here at this point. Let me move these out of the way here. And let me just step through this process. So when it comes to setting these up, this is my Verizon hotspot, and this is my FirstNet hotspot that I have. I'll just touch the side of them, and you can see they're actually powered on. They're ready to go to be able to provide some connections here. So I've got my router, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna power the router. The router here, this one that I use, this one by Ubiquiti, this takes a 12-volt power supply. So what this is actually connected to is simply just a Bioenno battery, 12 volts on it. It's a 12 amp hour. This will run this thing all day long on it. And what I do, you notice I've got a little piece of tape on the back, and there's a little flap here. I call this my courtesy tab on the back of this. This is a little bit of gaff tape. And what I do is I just peel that back, and it's got the barrel connection. I'm just go ahead and plug in that, and you can see the light comes on. It's being powered off of that Bioenno battery. And then I take the tape and I just cover over that port. What does that do? It keeps the port from being unplugged while you're using the router. If you're in the net control, things can get bumped, or maybe something happens and you want to make sure that your power stays up. So the switch is actually booting up now at this point. So let's go ahead and plug in some interwebs here. So I'm going to take just a really short Ethernet cable, and this is one that we made during the show the other day. It's really simple. We're just going to come over here to the Verizon hotspot. I'll just go ahead and plug that in to there. And then I'm going to plug it into the WAN 1 port here on the front. And we should see there's a little light that just starts blinking right away, letting us know that there's traffic. There's a connection that's going in. And so this thing is booting up and it's getting that information. Here's my hotspot here from FirstNet. I'm going to go ahead and just power that up as well using another little Ethernet cable here, just a little short one. Go ahead and plug that into the Ethernet port, and then come over here. I'm going to plug this one into WAN 2. And I'm not going to step through the actual configuration. You can see that it's kind of starting to blink a little bit. It's figuring out the network connection, and this thing is set up so that it will load balance equally between those two connections. Now, I don't have a really good connection here inside of my booth. I'm in a soundproof box, and so that really impacts my RF. So I'm not going to show you actually getting all the way onto the internet, because these generally don't work in here. So now we need to share that internet connection out to somewhere. So I have my Netgear switch, and notice I've got that Velcro that's up here again. And on the bottom of this one, I've got the hook side of the Velcro. So I can just take my top switch and just sit it here. And now I've got my stack of my equipment that's ready to go. And I have a really short little tiny Ethernet cable, and that is going to go literally from the LAN 1 port. Just plug it in right there. And now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to plug it into, oh, you know what? I should power. Let me power my network switch here as well. I'm just going to plug the connection in here. Now, my network switch, I can run this as PoE, but this is one that I do need a little bit more power because it's putting out 48 volts. So I've got it plugged into an AC terminal. You can use a little DC to AC adapter to be able to convert that. So now I've got this. I'm just going to plug it into my uplink port. So this now becomes my uplink port, and we should see there's a little light that's already blinking. So this is now sending the internet connection from this hotspot and from this hotspot, and sharing them out load balanced into here and to all of these other ports at that point. Let's go ahead and get some Wi-Fi on at this point. I just have my, whoops. Helps if I leave the hotspot, if I leave this thing plugged in here. And I'm going to plug this into my main port. And I'm going to plug it into one of the PoE ports over here. And we should see the light start blinking over here. There it goes. It's configuring. And now this access point is getting its instructions on what wireless access to set up, what network, how it needs to be configured. It's getting it all the way from this router. The router is acting as a controller for the Wi-Fi. We'll have to do a dedicated show for how to set up and do all of that fanciness, but that is how that goes. Now, all these other ports, I could do any of those other things that we mentioned to be able to plug into, but now we have a pretty robust network that's just sitting here and operating, putting out its Wi-Fi connection. And that's a pretty robust kind of setup here. Let's go back over to the slides and I'll show you what that looked like in the field. So here in the field, I already mentioned that here inside of the Go box, this 6U Gator box, there's the router that you see and that GS108 switch that's up in there. It's just kind of tucked way up in the top in there, and it's actually Velcroed in place, so it doesn't move when it's all set up in there. I also run, here's the FirstNet hotspot. It sits literally just up on the shelf above me, so I'm inside of the net control trailer. So I'm not inside of an Airstream. I'm not inside of a Faraday cage. And if the door that you see to my left, if that were open, I would actually move these hotspots outside. I have these were on longer Ethernet cables, so if we did move the door open, I could move them outside, but I had good solid connection, so I didn't need to be able to do that. Here's my Verizon WAN 2 hotspot. It's literally sitting up on the shelf on the other side of it. I keep those separated just a little bit, but that was the core of what my network was. Over further into the trailer, I had set up my little flying saucer, my little wireless access point, and I had two networks that were being served off of that. The net control, which was that guest network, and I did have some limits and some controls set on that. So in case the folks that were there in net control, I just put a little tag up on the wall so that people could be able to, join the network. They could see what the password was. But if they did decide to start using lots of bandwidth, I was able to limit that bandwidth just by simply having the configuration inside of the router and not have to worry about it. I had a second SSID or a second network that was being broadcast. This access point can actually handle up to 6 different networks simultaneously off of it. I think actually maybe even more. And I had this hidden W6AH network. So nobody saw it. All of my machines, all the devices inside of my boxes were all connected directly to that in a wireless or in a wired configuration. And so that allowed me to do whatever it is that I needed to be able to do for the event. Now, we typically had about 8 wired connections, and these were various different computers. They were various different devices. You can see I was doing a lot of video work and video production live during this event. And so that took into account those as well as some of the key functionality that was there inside of net control. At any one time, we had at least 8 wireless devices connected to this network. And at different times, we had 15 or 20 connected at any one time. And the router, by diversifying the network connection, it just handled it all absolutely beautifully. I was running two VLANs or virtual LANs, again, that one just for my equipment and my gear, and then one that was shared out for the rest of the folks that were operating net control. We were running at one point, we were running three separate Zooms. In one of the Zooms, we had up to 15 people simultaneously sending in video from around the course. We were able to watch the start of the marathon live because one of our operators was there at the start. They just used their phone to be able to turn on, join the Zoom, and they were able to then share that video directly into net control. And we were able to watch what was going on. The second Zoom that we were running all the time was another operator. They were actually running our chase bike, and they were the follow bike, and they were live streaming from a camera the entire time. Most of the time, they were live streaming up to YouTube, and so we were actually pulling in two YouTube feeds as well through this connection. And then this computer that's sitting right here, that was actually running OBS Studio. It was pulling in that feed from YouTube and then rebroadcasting it as a dedicated user inside of the Zoom. So anyone who joined on our team anywhere in the field of support could jump on to that Zoom connection, and they could see live what was happening in the race. They could watch the start. They could watch the follow bike as to what was going through. We had several operators that joined on, took an old iPhone or an old Android device that they had with them, and they just set it up, put it on a tripod, and turned on Zoom and shared out a video feed. So we had very good situational awareness across the entire course throughout the day. So we were pulling in two live streams from YouTube as part of this. We also used what's called a shared 214. And so you can see in the upper left-hand corner up here of the multi-view monitor, this is a spreadsheet. So all of our operators out in the field had a Google form that they could access. It was a 214 form style that they could go through. They could make some important notations, notable activities. We even had a place where they could upload some photographs from around the course, and they would submit those via Google form from their cell phones. And then we had a dedicated machine. It was this little B-Link computer that was sitting here running. And I had that connected up, and I had a second display that was set up for the net control operators. So at any point, they could quickly just look up and they could see that critical information that was coming in from the field using alternate methods. Now, it worked remarkably well throughout the day. As a matter of fact, on the Zoom, we had one of our operators at one of the aid stations, and they were unable to reach the repeaters that we were using. And so they were actually out of communication. So what they did is they still had cell connection at their aid station. They joined onto the Zoom. They were able to talk directly to me, and we were able to troubleshoot and figure out what they needed to do in order to get on the air and participate in the voice nets that were going on. It worked extremely, extremely well. We also had a couple of APRS gates. So we had antennas on our communications trailer. They were picking up the APRS pings. We had APRS trackers running on our various different chase bikes, on our we had medics out on bikes. We also had some SAG wagons that were out running around. And so all of that signal was being pulled in via APRS through our antennas. And then we were able to put all of those up onto APRS.FI. So any of the operators that were up in a section of the race that weren't able to receive those signals directly via RF, they could open up, say, APRS.FI on their phone, and they could get access to all of that tracking data. We also pushed that tracking data directly into the Zoom through these video switching capabilities. We were able to push any of this data that needed to get out to our operator. So if an operator joined onto the Zoom and they needed to see what was going on somewhere, we were in communication to be able to deliver that directly to them. Worked extremely, extremely well. So power-wise, we always got to talk about power when we're doing this. The entire communications trailer, our EmComm trailer, was running on a gasoline-powered generator, and that was providing the primary power throughout the building. So we had power to be able to do whatever we needed to. But if you look right behind my laptop, I had a UPS, or a universal power supply, with a big battery backup, and all of my gear was all plugged directly first into that UPS, and then it was plugged into the power for the trailer. Now, this did two things. First of all, it scrubbed the power coming in from the trailer directly into all of my gear to make sure I had a barrier, a layer of protection, to make sure that the sensitive gear that I was bringing in, the network gear, was isolated from the rest of the trailer. It was producing that much cleaner power that was coming in for me to run this different gear. The other thing that it did is when at a couple of times we had some issues with the generator. We had to switch over from one generator feed to another, and that took everything down in net control that was non-essential. So all the radios are on automatic battery backup, but anything that was plugged into an AC circuit that was considered non-essential, that all powered down, the lights in the room, all of that. But because I had the UPS plugged in and all of my gear was plugged into that, the network stayed up, the live stream stayed up, the Zoom stayed up, all of this data all remained live the entire time through multiple different power changeovers, as the team that was working on the power and restoring the power was able to troubleshoot those different issues. It worked extremely well. And it's when you really start thinking about the pace plan, start thinking about what is your primary connection that you're going to use, your primary solution that you're going to be working with. What's your alternate plan? So if one of the access points down, I had an alternate plan that was ready to go. If the power from the generator went down, I had an alternate plan in the UPS that was ready to take over. All of those things kind of worked through my contingency plans. I did have my cell phone that was there ready to go, and I could swap that in. We had that extra hotspot, the extra hotspot from, say, T-Mobile, and we tested it, make sure that, we could actually plug in T-Mobile if AT&T or Verizon had any issues, and we could keep the whole operation up and running. And if anything else failed, all the way down to, well, we're still doing all of our normal traffic via radio, via repeaters that were there. We had the ComL for the race had done an excellent job of putting together an excellent plan to make sure that we were perpetually in radio communication for all over the 26 miles through a deep cut ravine from Ojai, California, down into Ventura. So that's some of the things that we've been looking at. If you watched a couple of weeks ago when we did episode number 96, we were talking about the Arden mesh networking. And so we went into a lot more detail on some other networking basics. All of that applies to this. Likewise, all of this information that I just went through today, all of that directly applies to Arden. You can use all the same things. It's just instead of using your hotspot to be able to make your connection to Arden, you would just be using a access point that's connected onto the mesh, or maybe you're out in your own island and you're being able to provide some of these different services. So these different topics really kind of go hand in hand as we work through some of these. So over the past just few weeks, in episode number 91, we walked you through how to make power wires, power cables, power poles, and so forth. We walked through in episode number 94 how you can make your own network cables, how to crimp those. Then we spent a lot of time going through the details of Arden mesh networking that uses all ham bands to be able to do that. And today we've just walked through this basics of event support for field networking. I want to go over to David because David, you've done some support for some other different races, such as Baker to Vegas. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those setups are? And I'm probably missed a few other things as well.
Yeah, not a problem. Happy to do it, Chris. And I'll apologize. I don't have slides, but I have some show and tell for you guys. Baker to Vegas is a foot race, and it starts in Baker, California, or a couple miles outside of Baker, California. Goes 120 miles into Las Vegas, and it goes through essentially Death Valley. And for a good part of the race on the California side, there is no cell phone coverage whatsoever. In the middle of Chicago Valley, where I've worked for about 10 years, there's nothing there. It's just a wide spot in the road we set up. There's no cell coverage. There's no electricity. There's no running water. There's nothing. When we show up, they've dropped off about a dozen porta potties, and there's an RV to check runners in, and that's it. And we set up our own little tent city there. And one of the things we need to do is have some connectivity. We're tracking runners in and out. We need to be able to communicate with both sides of the road. We need to talk to our team, and we bring a team of about 15 or 16 ham radio operators to the site every year. And some of them are as far as a mile away. A mile out, we get an early warning. And one of our regulars here at Craig, KJ6IJJ, is one of my regular mile out warning folks. But in the camp itself, in the checkpoint where the runners are running through, we set up a little our own little network. And is there connectivity to the outside world? No, there's not. And sometimes we get Verizon to bring in a cow and we can connect into that. But we want to be able to set up devices so that we can log and share spreadsheets. We want to be able to beam video around, kind of like Chris showed you for the Ventura Marathon. And just because we don't have internet doesn't mean we can't share that around the site. And we do it with some simple devices, some simple tools. Some of the tools that we use are your basic, this is just a home Wi-Fi router that I took out of service when I upgraded to something better. And you've got your input, your WAN port, and you've got your 4 local network ports as well as some USB ports, so you can share some devices out. This works on 12 volts, and we've used this in the field a bunch of times. It's nice and easy to set up and provides us a lot of coverage. There's 2.4 and 5 gigahertz built right into the device, so I can cover a nice little bit of a bubble. And that's okay for the direct area around where we set this up, where we call our net control and our main loggers are. This works great for that, but I have some folks that work across the street a little further away. And the cool thing about setting up in the field and having lots of different tools and devices is I have this access point, and this access point is PoE powered. All it needs is your one Ethernet connection right into the bottom of the device. And this actually is very versatile unit. This could be set up as this actually sets up as a router if you wanted to in the field, and it will do the full router, including giving out DHCP devices. But it will also set up as a wireless access point. And I set this up as a wireless access point such that I can allow my main router that's serving IP addresses locally with the Wi-Fi here or through the wired ports here. It'll serve up anybody that gets access to this IP addresses as well. And so we set this up closer to the street, high up on a pole, and this does a really good job of covering that wide area and gets us across the street to where we have some operators that are actually literally sitting with the runners as they come through, and they wave the wand across the RFID tag so that they can track the time on the electronic machines that the Baker to Vegas folks contract with, while we're also keeping a paper and digital log and getting them tied into the laptop with the Wi-Fi back to our main net control. And then through this device, through the USB port, we plug a hard drive in here, and again, it's got NAS services, so you can share out this file share. And so we'll store a spreadsheet on a USB drive plugged into this port so that folks on both sides of the street can see that spreadsheet and update it real time. So we have multiple people looking at these files. A lot of fun. There's a lot you can do with it. We plug cameras in as well. Often what we use with the cameras is we actually put them on the Arden side. Part of the reason we put it on the Arden side is we have some 5 gigahertz dishes to push the signal out, and we actually literally push it 6 miles down the road to the stage before us, and they're pushing video up to us as well, so we can see what's kind of going on at both of those stages in real time over our own private, essentially our private network, where there is no connectivity otherwise. And that's it for this. Lots of tools. Don't throw your old routers away. You can pretty much use any home router for this kind of setup. It's really just about configuring your local network, what you plug into it, and how you want to use it.
Thanks a lot, David. Great job walking through that. The setup that David has been running at Baker to Vegas at the stage that he supports is absolutely incredible when you see it set up, and they're pushing video again across the desert. There's no internet connection, there's no nothing. They're just pushing that wherever they need to in order to deliver it to the folks that they are supporting with the race. It's absolutely awesome to be able to see. Hey, if you have access to Winlink, make sure you send in your Winlink check-in. We've been getting a lot of them that have been coming in throughout the time. I'm going to do another quick check here and see what other connections that we have that have come in. Let me come up here to my open session. We'll see if there's any more check-ins that have come in. If you found any of this information helpful, be sure to go onto the YouTube channel, like the video, and let us know how you've been using wireless networking to support your devices. Just leave us a comment down there. We'd love to hear how you've been supporting your teams and your events using networking. So it looks like we've gotten all of those connections now at that point. we're going to come over here and we're going to click on the little map icon up here at the top. Now, this is something that you can do on your own copy of Winlink as well. If you come down here in the select from, now I've received all of these check-ins. They all came to my check-in into my, I'm sorry, into my call sign. So I can look at the check-ins, and it's the Winlink check-in.v5. But if you want to map doing the same kind of thing that I'm doing here, you can go up and you can select the messages, and that'll show you, it'll bring up a map for you of all of the Winlink traffic that you have received. Now, obviously, it's going to look different than the map that I'm going to show. I'm going to show the map of just the check-ins that have come in. But this is the way that you can go in and use this. And with your emergency communications team, your Aries team, your Oxcom team, what have you, the agency that you're working with, you can, if you're receiving forms that are coming in, you can go in and you can select this form and bring up these maps. So let me come in here and we're going to go to the Winlink check-in. I'm going to hit the display map option. It's going to bring it up. We're zoomed into Southern California. We can see some of the check-ins here. I'll just go ahead and roll over some of these. It looks like this is our ComL from the race. This is Bert. Hey, thanks a lot for joining us. Bert, you did a fantastic job supporting the Ventura Marathon and doing all the connections that we had there. Looking forward to presenting this stuff with you tomorrow night at the Aries meeting. We'll also roll some of these other ones. N6RFI joining us as well. We've got AE6JR. This looks like Logan KD6LLB down here. I'm going to roll over a lot more of these because there are a lot of these check-ins, and I want to be able to zoom out and make sure that we grab and show everybody. Let me put it in full screen mode as we kind of zoom out. I'll pick up a few more of these that are out in this different area. Come out and let's go ahead and zoom all the way out to get a global view of the check-ins that have come in. We're going to zoom over here and we'll start off down here in ZL land. There's Terry ZL1HOG joining us from New Zealand. We also got VK2SKY. Hey, thanks for becoming a supporter with Buy Us a Coffee. We really appreciated that coming in all the way from Australia. Really, really kind of you to be able to do that. Here we got Sierra Mike 7, Yankee Tango November. This looks like Roland DG1GHR. Looks like we've got Franz and another station. Oh, maybe it's Franz has got. No, there's another one. Oscar Echo 1. Lima Hotel Papa joining us. They're pretty near Franz. Maybe you guys know each other. Let's go ahead and zoom back into North America. Now, in order to zoom, I'm going to hold down the right-click button, and I'm going to drag. So right-click and drag allows you to pan around on the map. And you'll notice some of these check-ins are showing up here in this pink color. Well, that is a feature that's built into Winlink, and this is really kind of cool. It helps you really stand out and call out some data. If I come up here to the filters, you can see that I've got anybody who sent in their check-in via HF, it's going to tag those check-ins automatically as purple. So we could actually change, and we could say maybe instead of HF, maybe we could say those that came in via VHF, and we'll say save, and we'll see, oh, look, there's a bunch more. These folks are sending in their traffic via RF as well. It's a really good feature inside of Winlink here. We've got Victor Echo 3 Yankee X-Ray joining us from Canada and sent that in via VHF RF to us. Really appreciate that. I'm going to roll over a bunch more of these so we can get on to the next bit, but I want everybody to be able to see that we did get their check-ins as they have been sent in. We've got a lot of folks down here, it looks like in the Florida area that are joining us. This is like John joining us, KC5LAA, and this looks like King joining us here in Central Texas. Hopefully you guys are pretty far away from all those fires and pretty much downwind or upwind of that, not getting any impacts from that. And again, all of you folks that are here in the middle of the country, hopefully you're not getting any impacts from those gigantic fires that are there in the panhandle of Texas and spreading that out all over the place. Let's roll over a few more of these. Make sure everybody's able to see that we did get their check-ins. We'll go ahead and zoom in, right click and drag, and we'll roll over these other call signs as well. Everybody can see their traffic. It's really cool. You can actually click on these and it'll show you the whole information, the whole message that got sent in from that operator just by simply clicking on it here on the map. It really is just an amazing setup that the Winlink team has put together for all of this mapping capabilities that's in there. So that's what we've got in those locations. Let me come back up to the booth, and we'll bring the guys back up, and we'll go around for some final thoughts from folks. Let me bring everybody back up here. And Scott's in there somewhere. Where'd he go? There he is. There's Scott. Add to spotlight. There you go. Dan, NR6V, any closing thoughts from you for this week?
Well, another great job. This is the way I see this stuff. It's very simple in individual components, but it's how you build them into a workable system. And you've done a remarkable job of that for the race. And I think you did a great job explaining how those components can work together to get where you want to go. And when we talked about this for our planning meeting, I ordered a Nighthawk and got it off eBay in a day. That was pretty good. And I've got one of the GLI Net portable routers that will work with that. So I'm ready.
Excellent.
Or at least getting there.
Getting in and learning, just having an idea of what's possible can really make a huge difference, so that you can go through, and now you've got a little bit of a roadmap. You can go back and rewatch this and kind of go through that reverse pace plan, if you will, as to how you would go through configuring those, and let us know. We're happy to help. Scott, CAM6RFB, any closing thoughts from you this week?
Yeah, first off, want to shout out to Sierra Alpha 7, Juliet Mike Foxtrot in South Sweden. He checked in but wasn't able to see his dot, and he posted a comment in YouTube. Just want to recognize him for joining us in the chat. And yeah, just like Dan, my agency uses the Nighthawks extensively. I have my own personal one. On
I think we're losing your connection.
Everybody.
I think we're losing your connection there a little bit.
Yeah, can you still have me?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Yeah, so I use the Nighthawk quite extensively. Also got the little a little switch that I run behind my GL net. Are you still hearing me, Chris?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. So just keep in mind that the Nighthawks that we showed on here today are the MR1100s, and they are currently being phased out by Netgear. So they can get them relatively cheap on eBay out there. The newer model is the Nighthawk M6 Pro, and they run about 193 on eBay, and those will support up to about 32 users, and they're a true 5G system, where the MR1100s will typically support about 10 users. One side note on the MR1100, Chris talked about hooking up an Ethernet cable, is you have to turn that feature on in the admin settings of the Nighthawk. It doesn't come pre-configured on. But other than that, it's great having these little devices, and I highly recommend, if you get one of these devices, buy a secondary battery. It makes life so much easier.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. David, W0DHG, what kind of closing thoughts you got for us this week?
You know, it's more than just amateur radio, and I think we show that every week. You know, amateur radio is a lot, and we're all very passionate about the hobby. But when it comes to doing events and serving the community, there's a whole lot more that goes into it. And we show you lots of different ideas on how to get the connectivity going. Did we talk about amateur radio today? A little bit. We did a Winlink check-ins, but we showed you a lot of infrastructure that we put together to support what happens at an event. Not a lot of radio involved. Well, a lot of radio involved that's not amateur radio, right? We're using Wi-Fi, we're using cellular modems, we're using a lot of technology. It's all there. It's not as hard as it looks. You got to get it out, play around with it. And again, that's what we're always talking about. Get your gear out, test it out. You'd be surprised what you probably already have around your house. You don't have to go out and buy a whole bunch of stuff. That you can, make these bubbles, this setup that I showed you guys earlier, that we use for Baker to Vegas and some of the other field events that I do. This was stuff I had around the garage. This was stuff that, when at the house here, when my kids were around and they'd want to have a pool party, I took this little, wireless access point. We put it up in the backyard so all their friends can have internet, right? Because in the backyard that we don't have such good coverage on the cellular side. It's just gear that we have around, and you can deploy it quickly and then take it back down. And it's great because just one cable goes in here, you're good to go. So play with it, test it out. And if you have questions, send your cards and letters to us via Winlink.
Right. Exactly.
Just a quick add-on to what David said. Cost-wise, don't forget about your Goodwill stores. Your Goodwill stores are notorious for selling this gear at just fractions of the dollars. I mean, all kinds of stuff dirt cheap, and so
it's great to be able to have access to all of this technology. As a matter of fact, all of the gear that I was showing, the router, the switch, all of that, that's the old gear that I've actually I no longer use within the house. That's that has now been set as the backup stuff. And now I'm starting to take it out into the field and deploy it and include it into that Go box. That made a huge difference for being able to support the marathon and support the event. We'd love to hear more from you about the way that you are supporting the different events in your area using networking. And as David was saying, all of this uses wireless technology, which is what the foundation of ham radio really is. The foundation of what all of our modern technology is based off of at this point. All this wireless technology, really, it starts all the way back down with the ham radio operators and with what we're doing to be able to push a lot of this technology. Many of the folks who have developed a lot of these more advanced things started off as hams, and they were doing it with some basic ham gear, and then a lot of products end up getting commercialized. And so now we can just leverage and stand on the shoulder of giants and leverage all of that equipment as well to be able to provide the support that's needed, and know that we can always fall all the way back just to our radio communications if that's what we need, or Winlink or what have you. It's having all of those skills that you're able to do it. And if you find this stuff really helpful, consider going on to wavetalkers.com. Use the Buy Us a Coffee link. It really helps keep the lights on here and support us with all the things that we do. If you're here inside the Zoom, hang around. We're going to open up the mics for the after party. We'll take some questions and kind of go through whatever folks have questions for. If you'd like to join us for the after party at any point, make sure you go onto wavetalkers.com. At the bottom of every single page, there's a join us link. Go ahead and send us a note. We will add you to the mailing list. We only send out one message a week, and we give you the secret link into our Zoom for our live audience that's here inside of Zoom. There's a lot more people that watch this inside of Zoom than actually watch it out on the live show out on YouTube. So this is where most of the audience is actually at, and they hang around for the after party as well. So would love to see you guys there as well. Until next week, I'm Chris Mattia, W6AH 73, everyone.